Okay, this video here is to basically catch up anyone who missed Friday's class. We're going to cover the rise and fall of Peisistratos. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So on Friday we left off with Solon and how he was the famous lawgiver, one of the 7 wisest men in all of ancient Greece. And we learned about how he came in and reformed many of Athens' laws, canceled debt slavery, freed those who had been sold into debt slavery, and stimulated economic growth, brought in immigration, and curbed the power of the aristocrats by opening up those positions to anyone who could afford to be in that class. So it was no longer by blood, it was now by wealth, which is a step in the right direction, though it still left out most of the people in the polis. So, before Solon leaves, and he left after he put his laws in place so people would stop bugging him, he told them to pay attention and watch out for his cousin Peisistratos, who might be causing some trouble down the line. Now, Peisistratos was a general, famous general in Athens, and he was beloved by the people of the hills. And you'll recall we briefly talked about on Thursday that Athens had been divided up into 3 groups of people. The people of the plains, who were the rich land-holding farmers, the people of the coast, who were the middle-class merchants, and the people of the hills, who farmed the terrible spots to farm in Athens and were thus the poor farmers. So Peisistratos was loved by the people of the hills, that would be the poor people. And he decides that he wants to be tyrannos, or tyrant of ancient Athens. And this was something that we had seen across quite a few of the ancient polises. You'll recall that Cylon tried to set himself up as tyrannos and failed. Well, Peisistratos wants to do something along those lines, and so his first act is to get an army. Now, armies are super expensive, and quite frankly, they're a pain to get together, so he figured, why do that all himself when he could make the Athenians do it for him? So, he wounds himself and stumbles bleeding into the agora and says, "Oh, assassins are coming to get me. I need a bodyguard to protect myself." And the people of Athens vote him a bodyguard, and paid for by public expense. And Peisistratos promptly uses said bodyguards to seize control of the Acropolis and Athens. So, he is in, and he is now tyrannos. But things do not go well for him. And he is kicked out by Megacles. Megacles is a leader of the coastmen, so the merchant class, and one of our famous Alcmeoniads, or the Alcmeonii. Remember, this is the family of Megacles. Actually, this is the grandson of the Megacles who killed Cylon and tainted his family forever with the curse of committing sacrilege in the temple of Athena. But I guess his family wound up being back in Athens because his grandson is now a leader of the coastmen. And by teaming up with other people in Athens, he drives out Peisistratos. But he finds that holding power is much more difficult than seizing power. And just because he ran out Peisistratos doesn't mean that he can be the leading figure in Athens. And as his power starts to waver, he turns to his greatest enemy, the man who he had just exiled, Peisistratos, and makes a deal. So, the deal is that Peisistratos will marry the daughter of Megacles and bind them together, and then the grandsons of Peisistratos and Megacles will end up in control of Athens, which is win-win for both. But Peisistratos can't just kind of slink back to Athens and say, "Hey guys, I'm back." He needs a little bit more showiness. And so, legends says that he went and found a very tall woman who looked like Athena, dressed her up as Athena, and rides back into Athens on a chariot saying, "The goddess herself is here to bless me as tyrannos." And apparently the ruse was convincing enough that the people of Athens accepted it, and Peisistratos is back for his second term as tyrant. And things look good for Peisistratos, but he had 2 sons already, Hippias and Hipparchus, and he wasn't really interested in having more kids to kick them out. And so he didn't really pay much attention to his new wife. And needless to say, she was less than thrilled, and so word gets back to Megacles, grandson of Megacles, and he decides that this will not do. He wanted to have grandsons on the throne, and Peisistratos isn't living up to his bargain. He's clearly trying to keep his kids on the throne and not include the Alcmeonids. So this has to stop. And he drives off Peisistratos once more. So he finds that he didn't actually solve any of the problems that he had gone out to solve by bringing Peisistratos back in the first place, and he's pretty much in the same spot he was before. But Peisistratos is done playing nice. The gloves are off. He tried being politically savvy. He tried using clever stratagems, and quite frankly, it's time just to get down to seizing power the old-fashioned way. Hires an army of mercenaries, comes in, and takes the Tyrannos for the third and final time. Third time's the charm, and this time he holds Athens until his death, which will be 20 years later. When Peisistratos is tyrant, he does several important things that we need to talk about. First is that he keeps most of Solon's laws in place. Tyrant today, like the word dictator, has been tainted by the actions of people holding those offices, but originally they were not considered bad. A tyrant was simply someone who seized power through less than reputable means, but once they had the power, frequently they used it to do good things. And Peisistratos is fondly remembered. Peisistratos, the tyrant, has a sterling reputation, despite the fact he's rather unscrupulous in a lot of levels. But in ancient Greece, tyranny was not necessarily a bad thing. So Peisistratos, with his power, offers loans to the poor farmers. Now this, while it sounds virtuous, and in many ways it is, because many of these farmers simply needed a financial a loan in order to build the infrastructure their farms needed to really thrive. So Peisistratos is doing this. And by offering free loans to the poor farmers, he is making them wealthy enough to become hoplites. So Peisistratos has built himself an army of fanatically loyal supporters who owe their hoplite level status to Peisistratos directly. And you'll recall that being a hoplite and fighting in the phalanx of the polis was a very prestigious thing. So he has taken these poor farmers and raised them up to levels of civic acclaim, and suddenly they are upstanding citizens, and they owe it all to Peisistratos. Peisistratos is also very clever with his PR. When he runs across grumpy people, he doesn't lash out at them, he laughs it off. A very famous example is in response to a tax that he had levied. This is one of the first taxes in Athens, 5% across the board. He went wandering just to kind of see how Athens was doing, and he goes up to this mountain, and there's this grumpy old farmer, and Peisistratos hasn't revealed the fact that he's Peisistratos. He's just kind of walking around, and he says, hello, sir, what are you growing on this farm? And he looks around, and it's not a very prosperous farm, and the farmer says, rocks. I'm growing rocks, and Peisistratos can have his 5%. And Peisistratos just laughs and says, your farm is tax-free forever. And 1,000 years later, in Byzantine records, we still have the famous farm that is tax-free because Peisistratos says it was. They probably weren't losing very much tax revenue on such a terrible farm, but it's the principle that matters. And Peisistratos did a good job of spinning that. Peisistratos does a lot of sponsoring of public buildings, and this is pretty important. Water supplies, public fountains, temples, festivals, all of these major civic buildings and rituals are put in place and sponsored by Peisistratos. So Athens becomes beautiful in a way that it hadn't before. Caesar Augustus will embody this too. He famously says about Rome, I founded a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Peisistratos is of that same ilk. He sponsors having the Iliad and the Odyssey written down. This is the first time that we have a written record of the Iliad or the Odyssey, and it's because Peisistratos has said we should do this. So sometimes having one person in charge gets things done. We're going to get into the downsides of tyranny a little later. But for right now, Peisistratos is doing good things. The other important part, along with lifting up the farmers, is squashing down the aristocrats. So it kind of flattens things in the middle, which is important for a democracy, right? You can't have lords with more power if everyone is equal. So Peisistratos squashes noble power, not out of any love of democracy, but simply because rivalry cannot be tolerated. There is only one tyrant, and if you're getting too big as an aristocrat, then you got to get out. So he's already exiled Megacles and all of his family, and the aristocrats are systematically stripped of their power, and that has an important effect in bringing about democracy. But after 20 years of being tyrannos, Peisistratos dies of old age, and he leaves the throne to his two sons, Hippias and Hipparchus, who follow their father as tyrants. And everything is going well at first. They're continuing the policies of their father. But then one day, Hipparchus is attacked. So Hippias and Hipparchus are actually both attacked. I take back the first thing. In an attempt to destroy them by the Tyrannicides, these young men. And they kill Hipparchus, but they don't get Hippias. They're cut down. And Hippias's rule takes a turn for the paranoid and the violent. The days of being nice and benevolent are over. It is now a rule with an iron fist, and no dissension will be tolerated on pain of death. So we're now really plunging into the modern idea of a tyrant as an evil, despotic leader who leads with terror and cruelty. And Hippias, after watching his brother be slaughtered in front of his eyes by people who are conspiring against him, has taken a turn for the paranoid and is set on extracting vengeance. So, while all this is happening, we must turn our attention back to the Alcmeonids, the Alcmeonii. They were exiled, but they were not willing to sit still and just take it. So they fled and set up shop outside of Athens. And one day, when a temple at Delphi was destroyed by an earthquake, the Alcmeonids decide to put a bid in to rebuild the temple. And instead of just rebuilding it the way it was, they rebuild it with splendid marble and statuary and amazing ornamentation. I mean, this is a true, masterfully constructed temple, wildly expensive. And they did it all for a pittance, I mean, a fraction of the cost it took. And needless to say, the priests of Apollo are extraordinarily grateful. And, well, at this point, it's Megacles' son, Cleisthenes. But Cleisthenes turns in that favor right away to get a little bit of, well, to get something back from the oracle. And the Spartans, who were very pious and always consulted the oracle for advice and information, when they would go to visit the oracle of Delphi, the answer that they would get back, regardless of the question, it could be, how is the crops going to turn out this year? The answer would be, but first you must free Athens. And they'd respond, what are you talking about? And they'd ask again, and first you must free Athens. Free Athens. First you must free Athens. That's all they got. So finally King Cleomenes says, all right, fine, you know what? We'll do it. Whatever. He marches his Spartan army, the most powerful army in all of ancient Greece, into Athens and boots out Hippias, who flees. And Hippias actually takes up with King Cyrus the Great, the Persian king of kings. And we're going to hear about Hippias again at the Battle of Marathon, but for now he's out of the picture. But King Cleomenes, as a Spartan, never wants to be far from Sparta, so he marches out and leaves things to the Athenians. And we will pick that up on Monday.